welcome everybody. I'm Tally Walsh, the director of the National Cyber League. Franz Payer is the CEO of Cyber Skyline, and he's going to be doing a lot of the talking. Also, welcome to David Zaitchik, who is the current NCL commissioner. Thank you for joining, David. And then we do have, I think, at least one NCL board member on the call, David Durkee. So welcome, David, is the two Davids. And let me go ahead and admit everybody. And so I think with that, Franz, I've given everybody a heads up on what we're going to be talking about.
So this season, we actually had our highest number of teams get 100% completion in NCL in the team game. So we had 17 teams get 100%, which was quite an accomplishment there. And we'll have the leaderboard out. Our goal is either at the end of this week or the beginning of next week. We're just wrapping up our audit and our appeals process. It takes a little bit of time getting everyone coordinated together, but we know you all are eager to see those results. We put up the leaderboard so everyone can see it, but they're just not finalized yet. There still might be some changes as we finish the appeals process. One thing that we noticed from the survey results was that students seem to indicate that this was more accessible from a difficulty perspective than what we had last spring. And I hope that you've all seen that as well. I don't know if Tally, can you put up a poll asking how everyone thought the difficulty was? But our survey results seem to indicate that as well. If there's anyone who's got any feedback about how they felt about the difficulty, please, raise your hand or something. Would love to hear your feedback on the difficulty level of the games. The primary things that we saw people getting stumped on, there was a question, is a cryptography question with a PEM file. And so this is one of those very applied challenges where you actually had to use crypto tools in Linux directly within the platform. And so I think people were kind of a little bit caught off guard with not necessarily knowing the tools, but this was a hard level question. So we sort of expected that. And we went over all of the answers in the Slack channel. If you still have students who are asking, how do I solve something? Please point them towards the Slack channel because we go over how to solve all of the questions there. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Tally, were there any other major points about the fall season you think I should cover? You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, I just wanted to get the poll up. So I think this was what you were.
Yes. I'm specifically asking for your students' feedback. Are they telling you that they thought it was too easy, medium, or too hard? We're never going to get the difficulty perfect for everyone, but we at least strive to make it as accessible as possible to as many people as possible, given that NCL is made for all difficulty levels. The question here isn't necessarily, can your students solve all of the questions? It's more of, are they able to feel like they make substantial progress within the game? And that definition is going to vary from person to person.
So I can tell you so far the results are that 78% said medium and 22% said very challenging, and no one said easy.
Okay, well, to me, it sounds good that we're not making it too easy. I mean, our goal is to make it too challenging. I would like to hear if anyone who's said it was too challenging, would you be interested in sharing your the feedback from your students about what was too challenging and maybe some suggestions on how to make the game a little bit more accessible? You can use the reaction or the reaction raise hand so we can see that you'd like to speak.
You should be able to unmute yourselves at this point. Any feedback? Okay, so why don't we move on? So in terms of, before we move on to your questions, does anybody have additional questions about the fall season? John, you have your, you got yourself unmuted.
Yeah, it's, I don't know if it's a question or comment, but as far as the difficulty goes, do you see any issue, I don't know, benefit or what have you, with the fact that you had so many people get 100% complete? This is the first time I think I've seen 100% completion and accuracy out of, I think there was like 3 teams that did it.
Mm-hmm.
Just curious what your thoughts are there. Do you feel like you hit the sweet spot, or I would imagine in the top 5, top 10, there would be varying degrees of opinions on this is great, or no, I don't want it to be, come down to I waited, a couple of hours to put my stuff in, and that was the deciding factor. Not that, I got 100%, but I still didn't win.
Mm-hmm.
That type of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think our takeaway from this is we kind of need to balance out the difficulty level on both ends. We want to make sure that there's enough content in there to keep people challenged. We wouldn't want a massive tie being determined so easily. But at the same time, so arbitrarily by someone submitted a couple seconds before I did. I think that for us, there is the question of can we do more to increase the difficulty level on the higher end, but also still making sure that there's plenty of content on the easier end. I don't know if this necessarily, I don't think this necessarily changes our paradigm or philosophy on the way that we're approaching the difficulty level of the game. It's just something that it's kind of like a little bit of an art in terms of the difficulty level. When we created the content, we were not expecting to have a 3-way tie with people with 100% points and 100% accuracy. And so given that we can't really predict exactly how it's going to turn out, I don't know if this specifically changes our opinion on it, but I would love to hear, what, from your perspective, do you have any thoughts about the difficulty level and what you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from. It's definitely an art, not a science, right? You're trying to get inclusion. You're trying to get it to be challenging for all and valuable to everyone. And then you just have those high-end performers that may feel a little like, I finally get 100% and I can't get it over the goal line, so to speak. Yeah, so I totally get that. Maybe we end up having like a tournament of champions type of thing or something, further out. But I'm curious if you had any other feedback at the higher end and what they thought.
Well, from my perspective, I will say that it is encouraging to see so many teams able to solve all the challenges. It really shows the persistence of these teams and their ability. I think that it's actually had the effect of making it. I think when we look at the results, people seem to have a little bit more enjoyment knowing that it's a little bit more possible. I think sometimes there's some frustration with students if they don't see a team that gets 100% completion because then they don't feel like it's possible to do it. I think this is definitely something that we need to ponder a little bit more. I don't think this is something that we immediately make a change in how we're doing it. It's always a balance of how do you make it accessible to beginners, but also competitive on the high end. And I will say, NCL keeps getting bigger and bigger in terms of the participation. Getting first place is a harder and harder challenge every single season. There's more and more competition every single season. And I don't expect that trend to change going into the future. Yeah,
no, totally get it. And based on the data that you've shown, I think it's you probably hit a pretty good sweet spot here. Just again, curious what the top end teams had for feedback, or if they gave you any that way. But good stuff.
Thank you for your question.
Great. So I noticed a couple of people had their hands up and then I didn't see the hands again. I think it was Matthew Chapman and was it Stephen Kangas or Eric Patterson, both?
Let's do
this
Matt
this
first.
kind of
Yep.
went to can you hear me all right?
Mhm.
Yes. And I
Okay.
think one of your questions is up on the screen right now as well.
Yeah, I listed a few and I figured I'd jump in here because this was one of them. Some of the feedbacks we got from a couple of our teams is, as you go through it, if you do the individual competition and then the team competition, the order of magnitude of work isn't, I don't think, a whole lot different, but you have 7 people. So I think that kind of came to fruition, where we had the most completely solved challenges that I've also ever seen before. And my teams kind of came back and they said maybe that, for the team competition, the challenges or the difficulty seems about right, but maybe it's a little more condensed where you don't have quite as long as you do as one person, working that 56 hours. And it makes your team kind of do a little more work as the captain to get the right people and the right challenges to finish them on time. I just think with the magnitude of similar to the individual game with 7 people, this was much more solvable. And that's what we saw. So my team, a couple of my teams actually came back and said, maybe this one should be a little more condensed with team. And, maybe it's a 48-hour competition or a 36-hour competition to make them really get to that next level of teamwork to try to figure out, how to triage things and try to do them faster. Because with 4,000 teams, that was crazy. Great job. I started doing this 150 teams. You have almost 4,000. At that magnitude, you're going to get a lot of completions. So that was something feedback from our teams.
Yeah, so I find that feedback interesting because we always keep hearing from people asking for us to increase the duration of the competition. You're suggesting that maybe we should shorten it.
Maybe just for the team one, yeah.
Maybe for the team one, yeah.
Kids want to watch football and do other stuff too.
Well, that's the thing is that like I feel from my perspective, I see that everyone with time, people work to fill the time. So if we give them more time, they're just going to work less over a longer period of time in the team game. If we shorten it, it's more concentrated, but it's the balance between like, having a very fun and competitive event, and maybe you keep it shorter so that people can move on with their weekend and do something else during the weekend. But also we run into a lot of issues with people who have like work on the weekends or maybe some sort of school project and they need to dedicate some time. And yeah, those questions about what do we do with the time and the duration are pretty challenging. To your second point about the number of teams, this is actually primarily a consequence, the exponential increase of the number of teams you saw was primarily a consequence of how we changed the bracketing system, and actually rather we removed the bracketing system for this season. So to provide a little bit more context for people who aren't fully up to speed on the changes to bracketing, we made a shift over the summer where we decided that we were going to get rid of the bracketing system, primarily because the way that bracketing was determined in the individual game, bracketing was determined based on preseason performance, and in the team game, it was determined based on taking the best score of the best member of each team from the individual game, and then bracketing them in percentile ranges similar to how it's done with preseason and individual game. Now, we thought that this system caused it caused people to optimize for the wrong thing. A lot of people were very focused on wanting to get into gold because they wanted that recognition of being in gold. But our intent with those brackets were that we wanted to identify who's a beginner, who's intermediate, and who's advanced, so that they could be compared against their peers. And it had this connotation that like gold was better than bronze, which is not the case. You're not better if you're more like being a beginner is okay. It's not worse than being advanced. And so we didn't like the connotation that it had, so we switched to remove that, and now we're doing a badging system where you get a badge, a recognition of your performance after the game instead of getting this gold, silver, and bronze before the game. Now, as a side effect of that, it means that you no longer have to do preseason to get ranked in individual game, and you no longer have to do individual game to get ranked in team game. And so now a lot of the people who either did not participate in team game or didn't set up or did not participate in individual game or didn't set up a team in team game, now they're appearing in team game as ranked because that's no longer a prerequisite. And from what we see on our end, it seems to have kind of allowed a lot more people to be ranked in terms of the total number, but also in terms of the raw number of, sorry, the total number of people who are showing up as your tally, your total number of people in the game, as well as how many total people are participating and getting a rank, rather than people who show up in the tally but don't actually participate. So hopefully that explains the number of ranked teams now. It's because before they had to do individual game to get ranked in team game, and they had to set up a team to get ranked in team game, and that's no longer a requirement.
That's perfect. If I could just throw out one more, because it kind of gets to my second major comment, is I've kind of thrown this out every year, I think from the last 3 or 4 years, about the bracketing system. What we really want to do kind of at the next level, NCL is getting so expansive, and it's incredible for workforce development, what you did with CompTIA. Big kudos. This is fantastic. So what we're trying to do next is we really want to leverage that high school outreach. And kind of the recommendation I had put out there pretty much in every survey that comes out is to consider a bracketing system that is a high school bracket, an undergraduate bracket, a graduate bracket, and then maybe open. Because really now we want to get out to those high schools to start that recruitment, the cyber workforce development, and to be a lot more powerful if there was a high school bracket and say, hey, we're one of the top 100 high schools in the country. And then same with the undergraduates, because they're against some of the graduate students and PhDs. I just think that'd be something great to consider, because we'll get a lot more folks signing up, and it'll even grow bigger if we had a high school bracket, an undergraduate bracket, and then maybe open, let the professionals in too if you want to do that. So that's my other suggestion I wanted to bring up today. Thanks.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comment. So actually, we just this season, so you probably haven't seen it yet, we actually did start a high school leaderboard. And this has been a little bit trickier. So the reason why there was previously only a collegiate leaderboard is because we need a record of all of the schools that are in the leaderboard so that we can rank them, we can assign them properly. And there's Department of Education puts one out for colleges, but they don't put one out for high schools. There's no centralized database of all high schools of the US. But what we did this season is when we had high school coaches register, any students associated with them would get associated with the high school leaderboard. And we will actually put out a high school power ranking as a result of that new change this season. And so if you are working with high school faculty members, that is something that they can do. Now, I don't know if you are directly involved with high school students. If that's the case, you might need to create 2 profiles, one for your college students and one for your high school students, so that they get assigned to the proper leaderboard. But yes, that is definitely something that we're looking to into expanding, at least the high school side. And we still have some thoughts and some work to be done on the higher end and what we want to do with that. All right, I can
Great,
see
we
your
see your thumbs up. Okay, so before we get to the list of questions on here, was it Eric had or Stephen had your hand up? Stephen.
Yes, thanks. And thank you, Matthew, for bringing that point up, because I'm an instructor mentor advisor for a high school cybersecurity club that's this is now our 8th year, I think, of running. And I have encouraged my kids to play NCL, and just about every year we do have some players that are in it. And it would be nice, I think, to have a separate high school division, similar to some of the other games that they play in, so they can feel like they're competing against peers. So just another vote for that. I'm glad to hear, Franz, that you had a leaderboard this last time around that was separate for the high schools. I think that's what I heard you say.
Correct.
Our students didn't participate in fall. It's very difficult for our students to participate in fall. I usually point them to spring, and I push them towards spring because they're competing in Cyber Patriot in the fall. And that's those of you who are familiar with Cyber Patriot know that that's a fairly intense, kind of game schedule, and the training that we put the students through to get them ready and so forth. It's a prestigious thing that they want to do. And so there's this natural conflict. Not that I haven't tried. There's been 2 different years where we tried to do NCL fall at the same time, and it tended to be more the seniors who were looking forward to, doing what they could to improve their scouting report before they graduate that participated, but it's just kind of tough. So because of that, I guess I missed some of the changes that you're talking about. By the way, when it comes to having tied scores, I'm one for, why even have 100%? I mean, make it high enough to where no one gets 100%. This is all about learning and presenting a challenge. This shouldn't be about so-called quote unquote participation trophies. So making 100% really isn't, I believe, should be the goal or the factor here. Just having it be fun at the same time of it being a learning experience. However, if you do wind up in a situation where there are a bunch of tied teams, and you probably already know this, but there are some competitions that factor in time. So if you have 3 teams that get exactly the same score, well, then you move on in criteria to who did it the fastest. And I'm not sure in your platform how you could track the individual players over a weekend and the amount of time that they're logged in and so forth for a particular team, but it's just something to consider of how you might want to sort that out and wind up with a first, second, third place kind of winner amongst 3 ties at the top. Yeah, it seems like there was something else I wanted to ask, but I guess I'll have to wait until the question area.
There'll be an opportunity for sure. Curtis, you had your hand up, I think, and I think you provided some great questions ahead of time as well about changing the process for creating teams.
Well, I'm one of those guys that has high school kids and college kids, and we mix them. And so I'm to address that in the future if we separate them out. But I did have some high school kids that forgot to sign up with my college, and they used their high school name. So, the teams were confused on how that's being scored. The idea about making the teams, though, as a coach, is because I use this as a part of college credit, and I have particular groups that have different skill set levels, and when they created their own teams, some did well, but some of the teams, well, first of all, my high school kids, they just couldn't get into that. And I kept on saying, well, gotta go make a team so I can now, get people to add to you. And so unfortunately, some of them just didn't complete that in time. And it would have been easier if I just made a team and say, okay, now go join that team. So I just like to have some options as a coach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's this is a challenge that we kind of see across the board. Unfortunately, we get stuck between stakeholders sometimes, because in some circumstances,
yes,
the school pays for the students. In some circumstances, the student pays for themselves. And we get into some tricky drama where the students want it one way and the faculty members want it a different way. In a situation like you described, where it's a little bit more of a situation of apathy, where they haven't just put in the effort to do it, and it's not like a situation of a disagreement on the way that they want it, you can open a support ticket with us, and we'll set up the team kind of as you described it. Although if we do come into a situation where the student specifically wants it one way and you want another way, and the student's paid for it, then we have to respect the student's wishes. It's just a conflict of stakeholder here.
Yeah, so Franz, I think in my case, I definitely will use the support tickets. I I waited too long into the process to actually go do that, but I will be ahead of it in the springtime.
All right, great to hear.
Yeah, you never know what's going on behind the scenes. You think it's something that could be really easy. And then there's usually reasons why we didn't do them.
Yeah, I
Um,
take the position that you guys have a very complex world. And so that's why I said, well, is there something that coaches can do that might, solve some of these problems? But I could see your point there, Franz and Tully.
So the first question that's up on the screen, what's a good way to get people involved and prep them for the season? This was asked by Quincy Card. Is he here today? I don't think I see him. But perhaps, Franz, you can go into just a short summary of what's involved there, or even David Zychik.
Well, I'll start first by giving some of my initial thoughts, but I think David probably has a better perspective as a faculty member actually implementing NCL. From my perspective, I think definitely like the best way to get students involved is to one, kind of get them bought in as to why they should be participating for their own good. And the big argument to be there is that if you are looking for a job in cybersecurity, NCL is a great way for you to practice those real world skills. You will actually perform the tasks that you will need to do on the job. And so if you have questions of like, am I going to be prepared? Do I know what I'm interested in doing even? The NCL is a great opportunity to answer some of those questions. And so I would start first with getting the student motivated to participate outside of because you told them to. If they feel personally vested in there, they will get a lot more out of the experience. The second way I would suggest that you get them involved is by having them go through the gym. Now, David has put together a timeline of going through which order you should go through the gym components, and how you can spread that out over the course of the season to help you kind of go through that process. Students can choose to go through the gym in any order that they want or at any pace that they want, but the gym is a great way for them to practice. I'd also recommend you have your students sign up for one of our crowdcasts. So if you have not done that before, it's if you go to crowdcast.io/NCL, almost every week we run a webinar describing some sort of topic that will help students during the NCL games. And so in the past, we've covered like a lot of the challenges in the gym. Yeah, Tally's bringing it up here. I've talked about how to use SQL. This upcoming Thursday, we have a webinar about the basics of code. Pretty useful if you have some students who are in IT or cyber but don't have a programming background. And every single week that we run these webinars, the students have the opportunity to ask any questions, and then they get to suggest ideas for future episodes. And so this is really, really driven by the needs of the students. And if you have students who are confused about how to do some challenges in the gym, we already have a lot of past content that walks through solving the challenges step by step with some commentary or some additional background. And so if they're not good at taking the data visually from just reading the slide, the PDF documents we have in the gym, the webinars are a good way for them to actually hear an explanation of how things work, visually see the process of going through, and even following along if they have access to the gym. So those are my two recommendations. David, do you have any additional recommendations?
I think just kind of to reiterate what you were saying, so one reason why I even decided to incorporate NCL into my class was to expand the hands-on learning piece. So I went over the theoretical piece. I came up with some of my own labs, but then I wanted them to really, dig deep and then also kind of learn more at, how much they could expand on their own personally. And the NCL does a great job of that, where, students can kind of grow and do as much as they possibly can, in terms of not just difficulty level, but also like hours spent. So if students really want to dig and learn more about it, there's a great, opportunity for them to do that. So I structure my class now specifically around each of the categories. So leading up to the individual game, by that time, I've gone through week by week and I've at least talked about each of the categories. I've given them some lab about the categories. One great thing now about the gym is those are also open for students to use, and I have incorporated the gym as my lab. So I thank the NCL for taking on a lot of creating my lab work. It's been nice. And it also helps grade some of the lab work as well. So I feel like when I first introduced NCL, I'd say students, their main complaint was, well, we're not covering everything before we go and do it. But now I've kind of squeezed everything in to be able to at least cover all the topics, talk about, at least some useful tools and how to use them before they jump in and at least attempt the NCL. And then I don't know if you have a slide on it, Tally, but we do have that a link to my Google Doc.
Yeah, I don't want to do it right now, but it is on the coaches resources page on the NCL website as well.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that
very clear,
aware of
easy
that.
to find, and people can just download that. And we really appreciate you for developing it and being part of our coaches committee and community.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the next question, I think Nathan Frost, who is here, I believe, wanted to know if students that register but do not participate in the game are counted against a school for the power rankings. Nathan, would you like to elaborate on your question? Maybe he's not available at the moment. But Franz, did you get the gist of that you can answer for people?
So just to make sure I'm understanding the question is students who register but do not participate, do they affect the power ranking?
Yes.
They do not. Only students who make a submission in a game count towards the power ranking.
Okay. In that case, why don't we move on to the next one? So Sharon, I see that you're here. You had a few questions also about the power rankings. And do you want me to read them or do you want to ask them?
You can go ahead and read them. I'm co-chair with Frost, so I know exactly what he was saying, because the way we were reading the rules, it seemed that if we had students that were in the individual games and, we paid for their ticket and they just decided not to play and they ended up with zeros, we wanted just to make sure that, that didn't count against us in the power rankings in the end. So you're saying no. Okay.
No. And also, student performance will never negatively contribute to the power ranking. We didn't want to be in a situation where having beginners would mean the power ranking goes down. And so there are three primary metrics that we have in the power ranking. The highest weight is the top team from each school in the team game. And then the second one is the top individual from each school in the team game. And then the third one is basically we take all of your students who participated in the individual game and we assign a point value, 1 for a low score, 2 for a medium score, and 3 for a high score, and then we'll just sum them up together, and then that's the value that you get for your participation rank in NCL, and then we do ordinal a ranking on that. And so basically, schools who have a lot of students who are beginners, they will just have a lot of 1s in their summation. And then schools who have a smaller group, but they're very experienced students will have more 3s in that calculation. And so you can only benefit by having more students, although you also benefit by having students who are also more advanced towards that ranking. So there's no situation where having a beginner will negatively impact your school's power ranking. Having more students only increases your power ranking.
Okay, because we have a mixed group that ends up, we only actually fielded one team with 5 players, so we weren't even able to fill a team. So, Sometimes we have trouble getting participation. That being said, the other thing I just wanted to clarify is about how many teams there were. I know there were 4,000 or close to 4,000 individual players, but how many teams were fielded this semester?
That's a good question. Let me
Just
see
with
if
our
I actually,
calculations, we went through the bar graph and we came up with something like 390 something.
yeah,
Should we come back to that in a minute?
yeah,
Sure, I'm just curious to
let me
know.
get,
Yeah,
I will have that answer for you in
yeah, so maybe
just a
just,
second.
you know,
Thank you.
individuals, teams and schools might be a helpful guide.
Thank you.
And then Matthew, I saw you had your hand up. Was it about this topic?
Yeah, thanks. I did have one question. The power rankings are really important. For us, we use that, try to get funding for the school, job positions, even working with the state legislature. So thank you for doing that. It's really important for us to highlight the team rankings. One of the maybe the inconsistencies, I'm not sure how you handle this, is I think over the years now there's rules that teams don't have to be from the same school. So I'm not sure, does that dilute the team rankings? If you had a PhD student from somewhere else on your community college or something like that, how do you make sure that the power rankings for the team are actually teams that are from that school? Because like I said, the power rankings, thank you for doing it, really help us get resources at the school.
So the power ranking, the way that it works is that each team is allowed to have one team member that is not from the same school as everyone else. And that only applies for teams that are 3 or more. Obviously, if you're a team of 2 and both people are from different schools, we don't know which school to associate that team with. So any team that has 3 or more players, you are allowed one member that is not from that school. Now we use the demographic information that is submitted when students register for the game to make that determination. And so this is kind of why we have that little disclaimer to make sure that if you're, especially if you're from a college, that your school auto completes, because we want to make sure that we're associating you with the correct school. But if you have, I know of some programs where you might have like a 4-year university working with some community colleges, and you might have mixed teams in that regard. You would want to instruct your students to fill in the demographic information in which you would like their score to count towards, right? Because if you have a mixed team of community college students and 4-year students, and you want it to count to one institution or the other, then you need to come to agreement on who they're going to count towards. Otherwise, it will be split, and neither institution will get the credit for that school.
Yeah, just kind of my suggestion would be to consider that, if you're dealing with school power rankings, they probably should be school pure. Because as if you've played the game a lot, if you got one ringer that really breaks down, the web apps or the exploitation, that's a game changer completely. So I do think for the power ranking, it should be team, school pure if we're actually using that to rank the universities. Just kind of my 2 cents.
Okay. Yeah. I appreciate the feedback.
Because it is really important for us, because we do use that, like I said, again, with the state legislature, and because we're trying to develop a cyber workforce. So it is.
I would agree with Matthew on that also. Same thing here from my university.
Great. Okay.
Actually, Tali, let me loop back around, because I got the number up.
Okay.
So we had 926 teams in the fall season.
Okay. So
Thanks for that.
you're welcome.
How many
now-
different schools does that represent?
That is not a number I have easily accessible, but that will come out when we put out.
We
the
do
SAM
an
reports.
annual report every year, so it'll be, or actually every season it's updated. It'll be on the website probably the beginning of next year, close to the beginning of next year. So if you look under the About section of the National Cyber League website, you'll always find the annual report there with the numbers. Okay, I wanted to ask Wesley Phillips if he's available. He had a question, but well, actually he said, I have too many questions to list here. And he said, I'm interested in learning how to complete every lab. The team I coached wants me to help them answer lots of questions posed in the competition. Wesley, are you available?
I am here. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for posing the question that I couldn't remember that I wrote.
Okay, so did
Well,
you have any
Sure,
elaboration on that?
sure. This is my third NCL that I've coached people. I think this is fantastic. I absolutely love what you all do. I'm coaching everything from 11-year-old boys and girls to adults. And I do a pretty good job myself, being that I do cyber for a profession, but I still don't know it all. And when we went to the contest, I'm like, wow, I actually don't know how to figure this out, or I haven't figured this out yet. So this is maybe my second or third season of, man, I haven't figured this out yet. You know what? I'm going to see if I can get on one of the coaches' calls or call somebody and see if I can socially engineer how to answer some of these questions. So that's kind of why I'm here, because I'd like to be able to better coach my students and college students that I've convinced to come in. I'd like to be able to show them how to answer questions that even I don't know how to answer.
So there's two suggestions I have. If you're referring to the gym question specifically, we do have the guides in there. If you need more information than what's in the guides, I would definitely recommend you check out the Crowdcasts or the YouTube channel that we have, because we have done like recorded step-by-step demonstration of how to solve the challenges. And so that might be helpful for you. If you're referring to the questions during the games, we have a debrief at the end of every game in Slack. And so if you have not been to that, you can get an invite. If you've signed up for NCL, you can go to cyberskyline.com/Slack, and that will invite you to the Slack channel. We have a section in there which specifically is organized by question, and we have discussions on how do you actually go about solving every single question in the games. And so that's what I would recommend.
Okay, as far as the gym, that's not difficult at all. I've solved, I didn't solve 3 of them, so I need to go back and just figure out those only 3. I'm also curious, are you going to leave the same gymnasium up next year, or because it seems to be the same one that I used last season?
So the gym content we carry forward between seasons, and so the substance of that is not going to change drastically. We've added a handful of challenges here and there, and over the last season, I think we went back and we updated some of the guides to provide additional information. But we want to keep the gym relatively stable so that instructors can teach to that and not have to worry about it being cycled through drastically. So we intend to keep all of the content there with additions to the guides and additions to maybe a handful of additional questions and challenges between seasons, but don't expect that to change drastically between seasons.
Okay, as far as the Slack channel, how long would that be available so I can go through it and learn how to answer every question?
It's an indeterminate amount of time, so we don't take it down, but Slack has a limit for how many messages they'll save in the history. So if I had to guess, I'd say a couple of months. Definitely when the new season starts again, all the new messages that we get from the new season will clear out the history and kick out the old stuff. But I can't give you a definitive. It's just however long Slack keeps the history there.
I'm tracking. So do you have any additional material if I wanted to learn how to teach this to my mentees, if you will, that an instructor can use?
That's a good question.
You know, I think honestly, if you go through those tutorials on the NCL YouTube channel, they're about 45 minutes to an hour each, but they actually, France does a fantastic job of actually walking people through the, like a demonstration of how you might go about answering, and, provides tools how you might go about answering specific challenges. So I highly recommend those.
So what I will say is that I want to make sure that the practice is fully accessible to students and faculty members. If you don't feel that it's information in the gym, in those PDF documents or in the videos sufficiently covers the topics, please let me know and send me a message. I'll put my email address in the chat because we would like to create that material to make it accessible. And then anything with regards to the games and discussion on how to solve the challenges in the games themselves, all of that happens on Slack. And so, yeah, please let me know if there's something that you think requires additional explanation.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've been to the YouTube channel. I don't know if it's just my luck or what. The ones that you've done on the YouTube channel, I already know how to do. I need the
Okay.
I
Well,
need the tough stuff.
We're working our way up there
Yeah.
because
I got it.
yeah, some of the harder stuff like the enumeration exploitation challenges, like you have to explain a lot of background before you can get into there. So yeah, we're making these on a consistent basis, and we're gonna get further down into the more difficult stuff in the gym.
Send us questions.
Yeah,
Franz will put it on his list.
I sure will. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'll tell you again, this is absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love doing it.
Thank you, Wesley. And we know what you're going to be doing over your holidays.
How did you know?
all right. Yeah, thank you.
So I think that Justin is here. Justin Williams, are you available?
Yes, I am.
So in case you didn't remember what your question was, you said, would be highly interested in how to set up a coaching account and when registration would open up for the spring season. And I heard about this being something that can be integrated into courses and would love to learn more about that. And that was something that we covered earlier. That last question was something that we covered earlier that David Zychek talked about. But maybe Franz, you could cover the first part about setting up the coaching account and the registration dates for the spring season.
Sure. So you're not going to see it right now because we still have the information for this current fall on the registration site. But if you go to the National Cyber League website, there's that big button that says access the season here, and that will take you to the registration portal. When the season registration opens for the spring, there will be two buttons there. One button will be for student registration, the other button will be for faculty registration. And so you'll just click the faculty registration. Faculty registration is free. You just put in your demographic information, submit it, and at that point, you'll be given the opportunity to decide, do you want to pay for your students' registration as a bulk purchase, or you can instruct them to register individually, and then you can provide them a pairing link, or we call it the coach observation link, which confirms you as their coach so that you'll see them in your dashboard. And after you register, you use the exact same link to get to the portal, which will have all the information about all of your students and access to the different elements of the NCL games. Now, spring season, we're going to be formally publishing these dates, I believe, next week. But we'll give you a early preview into what those are. So we are going to open registration on January 31st. The preseason game will be March 28th until April 4th. And the individual game will be April 8th until April 10th. The team game will be April 22nd until the 24th. And then the gym will close on May 27th. And so we're avoiding Easter with this schedule, and we're avoiding as much of Passover as possible. And basically all the games will happen in April. And so we hope that most schools will be able to fit that in between spring break and their final season.
So Justin, I didn't give you an opportunity to elaborate. Are there any other questions that you have?
I mean, not off the top of my head, that pretty much answered a majority of what I was looking for. Thank you very much. Since it's gonna be like my first time going through this, I just kind of wanted to garner what all was going to be involved with setting up the coaching account and all that, and getting some students who are interested in all this squared away with accounts as well. So yeah, thank you very much for that, and also thank you for like the early preview, so to speak. So I'll make sure to write those dates down and have that ready for when. So sign up is going to be probably around January 31st, so to speak, or is that correct? Okay.
Correct. And so we have a pretty long registration period. We're not publishing the cutoff date yet, but it's gonna be around when preseason is.
Okay.
Yeah, if the earlier that your students get registered, the longer they have access to the practice, right? And so your incentive for getting them in earlier is that they'll have more time to practice. You don't want to wait until the last second, because then you won't have any opportunity to practice.
Alrighty. All right. Yeah. Thank you very much. And yeah, I think that's all I really have right now. So if anything else comes up, I'll make sure to reach out.
All right.
Really glad you had a chance to join us, and feel free to reach out anytime. Stephen, you had your hand up. Stephen Kangas.
Yes, I was writing as fast as I could, and I still didn't get all those dates. I have a club meeting with my students here in about 35 minutes, so I'd like to encourage them, as I usually do, to participate in spring. Registration says towards the end of January. The preseason game is when?
Let me actually just post these in the chat, because that'll make sure that everyone will be able to see them here. So
okay.
Preseason is March 28th until April 4th. Individual is March 28th to April 4th. Individual is April 8th to the 10th, and then team is the 22nd to the 24th.
And when does the gym open and close?
So the gym opens at the same time as registration on January 31st, and it closes on May 27th.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're reaching the end of our hour. I did want to call on Ken Shimrusky. Am I saying your name right? Maybe not available. And I think we answered your question about preparing the students and participating as a coach, but if you have any other thoughts, feel free to let us know.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute there. I think most or a lot of what I'm trying to get to has been answered. My concerns, we've tried the competition in the past a couple of times, and the students, I think the big challenge is always, where do you start, kind of a thing. And certainly schools that have done this year after year have a great advantage, because they've kind of built up a knowledge base that they pass on from year to year. Getting started is really tough, and our program tends to not have a ton of students in it, so that kind of institutional knowledge is difficult to carry over. I was just looking at some of the stuff you guys mentioned here on YouTube, and it looks like you're at least recording some of the conversations you guys have for, is it tutorials, or is it just these coaches conversations? What all is available out there?
Well, we have the coaches calls. Some of them, most of them are recorded, but the tutorials is what you'd want to get access to.
And are those on YouTube?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we do them live, typically Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, and after we do them live, we re-upload them to YouTube.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, I think the confusion might be we have the player ambassadors, they have meetings and they record those and they're up on YouTube. Then we have the coaches that has it up there. But if you want a good guide for how to get started, Crypto Kate's guide for coaches is excellent. And I used that 2 years ago to get my program started.
Is that also on YouTube?
The website for Crypto Kate, Franz, I don't know what that website is, but I know you folks have it available for coaches.
Well, so we've migrated the coaches document. And so if you go to nationalcyberleague.org and then under resources, you hover there, then you click on coaches. there's a button there. It says manual integrate NCL into classrooms. That has a guide there for getting started. And then a lot of the content in the CryptoKate, like that original document is in the gym itself. So you can go there, and Toby just posted a link to that guide in the chat. I know we're coming up on time right now, so I just wanted to pose a question to the group, and this isn't necessarily meant for people to answer right now, but something to ponder and potentially email us for feedback or maybe for discussion in the next coach's call. But one thing that we've been noticing is that some students look at their NCL score and they treat it like it's like a letter grade that they get on a quiz or a test, which is not the correct way to look at it. The competition is meant to give you a lot of content for a lot of different skill levels. It's not designed for each person's unique skill level. It's designed for the high end of the skill level in terms of the 100% completion. And as a beginner, you're aiming for a certain percentage completion. And then when you come back and become more advanced, you aim for higher and higher goals. It's something where your expectations should be dynamic rather than static. I'm going to get an A grade or a B grade or a C grade or what have you. And what we've noticed is that some students will indicate that they found it too difficult when we actually look at the results, they performed very well compared to their peers. So the question I like to pose to the group here is, what would you recommend and what's the communication you would recommend to give to students to kind of get them away from this notion that they should look at their NCL score as if it was a normal grade? Because I think in that mindset, it can be kind of demotivating if you see, I got a 50%, that's a failing grade. In reality, if you're a beginner, especially a first timer coming in, you get a 50% in NCL, that's actually pretty extraordinary if you're coming in with not a lot of cybersecurity knowledge. And so we're trying to think of ways to kind of shift that mentality, that paradigm in a lot of students' heads so that the games are more accessible. We don't want to artificially lower the difficulty level. We want to make students understand that they shouldn't hold themselves to the same standards in the NCL competition as they would like a standardized exam they would get in school. So any thoughts? Not meant to share today, but please email us if you have thoughts. And then I think this is something where we can have further discussion in the future.
So thank you everybody for joining us, and enjoy your holidays. It's almost time.
Yay.
Yeah. Thanks
Thank
all.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.